Hello, welcome to another episode of Stan the History Man. I'm your host, Dr. Stanley Sandler, and today I want to talk about American or U.S. Civil War monitors. Now, most of you undoubtedly know the U.S. Monitor, which clashed with the CSS Virginia or the old Merrimack in the world's first ironclad battle. Now, a lot of people think that's the Monitor or the Merrimack were the world's first ironclads. That's not true. England was turning them out far faster than we were. In fact, the English had a seagoing ironclad, HMS. I can't forget the name of it, but anyway, a seagoing ironclad at enormous range as well, and and also a number of smaller ironclads, which could almost be called monitors. So we were not in advance. Well, in fact, the most technology at that time, we were well behind. But anyway, the there became the both the ironclads, the Monitor and the Virginia, fought to a standstill because they couldn't penetrate each other's armor. As a matter of fact, during the Civil War, I can find no case where regular uh, seagoing naval guns penetrated the armor of another ironclad. In other words, the armor was supreme in those days during the Civil War. But anyway, there was a veritable monitor craze that swept the nation because there was a fear that the Merrimack would have to sail up the Potomac and bombard D.C., which of course is ridiculous with a very heavy draft version. But no, in fact, the Virginia was really a cobbled up old Union wooden frigate that they covered. They built like a giant barn with about 8 guns and covered it with railroad iron, actually. They did their best. But anyway, so the Monitor, well, this was the design of John Ericsson, a Swedish American, and his idea was to have a turreted warship. And of course, the British were beginning to build them as well. And I'll talk about that a little later. But a ship without mast or sails and with a turret of the Civil War era. See, very low freeboard and the guns in a turret. And I'll just ship around to shoot your guns, a decent target. But now the guns are in a turret, and now this particular one is actually USS Tecumseh. All the monitors, except for the first one, were named after Indians. In particular tribes, there's the Osage and the Pamunkey, and so on. It's interesting because this is such an American. Now, the monitors, we built about 55 of them during the Civil War. I say about because a number of ironclads were built that had low freeboard, but really might not be considered as monitors. Sometimes the guns were ranged along the side or did not have a turret, that type of thing. But the overwhelming majority, which Erickson thought was a great idea, like use the water as armor plate, if you will. Everything above the water line was armor plated. They were at very low reserve buoyancy. And the original Monitor was sunk, as you may know, in a storm off the North Carolina coast. And her wreck was found in a heavy thing encrusted with barnacles and whatever was brought up to the harbor where they'd been bombarding Confederate fortifications, including Fort Sumter. And a wave brought by about a passing ship went over the upper deck and flooded it, and it sank with fairly heavy loss of life. Now, of Faraday in battle, and an underwater they called them torpedoes. Actually, we call them a mine now. They're really just beer barrels filled with like a tube or something. And when the ship would go, the gunpowder and cause a horrific explosion. And the Tecumseh and the has been pointed out that this is the first case of the instantaneous loss of the warship, or near instantaneous, in battle. I mean, wooden ships would catch on fire and explode, but that would take a while, and it was very hard to penetrate the wood of iron ship of wood to battle. Sometimes even boarding and cutlass and sword. But in this one, it went down in less than 2 minutes. And there's the story that the captain and the pilot they found the Tecumseh at the bottom of the, or in the mud of the Mobile Bay, and I was part of a Smithsonian project to raise it, because here you have a ship lost in battle. The guns are shotted and run out. The men are at their posts. Everything is there. I mean, the supplies. I mean, food, ammunition, whatever. And so we're doing all the research and so on. But they found out people, as soon as they would hit the air, they'd split, and they would then the whole monitor basically fall apart. Wood and so on. It might down is a great idea, but it's not going to work. But at any rate, the monitors were used all over the eastern seaboard, up rivers and in harbors and bays, of course. And it was like an adventure to cross an ocean in a monitor. One monitor actually was sent to California, to San Francisco, but it was taken apart and packaged, and then, like, in a do-it-yourself kit, when it got to San Francisco, it was put together again. But I mean, they really were. First of all, the monitors had 4 feet and 4 inches, 4.5 inch of armor plate, which was the same as most British ironclads. However, the U.S. monitors had the plate of 1 inch thick plates bolted together, because we could not make the plates, and then you're stuck. You have to move the ship instead of the gun. The British had a better idea. The whole bottom part of the turret passed through the first, down on the further British turret warship, having a turret jamming. It's interesting. The captain, Cooper Holzer, Navy, he's the one that devised this very superior type of turret. And Coles had the idea that, well, we can have like giant iron himself and talk the Royal Navy into building, but also a full rig of sails. And this is a disastrous combination, because the wind was a fairly moderate storm off the Cape, I think it's Finisterre, in Spain, the waters off Spain. It was blown right over and sunk with heavy loss of life. In fact, it's the largest single loss of life on a British warship throughout the entire 19th century. So the idea of design came along, and not from Captain Coles, because he died on the captain. He was, it's my ship, I'm going to go aboard. And it's not the maiden run, but like second or third run. He died on board. And then later they said the monitor idea with a bigger freeboard and no master sails, and that was HMS Devastation, which was the future of all future battleships, ironclads, battleships. And I wrote about this a fair amount, and I won't tell you all that I read. What that was. It made it obsolete everything before it. Well, certainly HMS Devastation made everything obsolete that had been built before Devastation. Floor of the monitor, which had to match up with a hole or a hatch, match up with the hatch on the so they could pass the ammunition and so on to the crew. The guy, I don't know how to make us fire, and then the next one. So it was a lot of faults with the monitor, but there really was, to say, this monitor craze. I mean, it was publicity, and I'm sure John Erickson. I know John Erickson was really pushing this. The monitor. That's the monitor fear to the British. Well, still a naval roll iron protect the iron armor more than 1 inch thick, so they had to get like 4 inch thick plates of armor and bolt them together, which didn't give nearly as much. Confederacy will help us, and we'll all get back together again. I mean, he's sort of a smart guy, but he didn't. Yeah, that was really a crazy idea. But when we talk about the dog wagging the same type of thing, get a proof of the superiority of the British ironclads. There were 2 turreted ironclads, just like Mon, and the Confederates. I think I don't know how much money he told the British Foreign Secretary. It is superfluous to point out to you that if these ships sail, this means war. In other words, those two ships, the and their far superior armor, they could have punched a hole in the Federal blockade, which was strangling the Confederacy. And by international law, You can't just say we're going to blockade this um, blockade of the South. And then the British could say, okay, you really don't have a blockade anymore, and it will be piracy if you try to stop our ships from coming in. So that's why the American consul said, if these two ships get into the hands of the Confederacy, it is superfluous for me to point out to Your Excellency that this means war. Okay, which is certainly was. Now, we built a number of monitors with more than one, even had three turrets, but usually one or two. He said it was like having two suns in the universe. And you can debate that. You have four guns instead of two, that type of thing. But Erickson said, well, that's two more things that can go wrong with the turrets and whatever. I should mention also everything here in the monitors was steam powered. The turret was steam powered. The winches, like to bring up the anchor and so on, was steam portholes. They'd be swamped immediately. Don't even think about a porthole. So the place was very dark and dank, and so they had to have these fans. I just haven't read anything about the actual setup of them, but it's obvious that everything would have to in the ventilation inferior. And very dangerous. Say they didn't have that reserve buoyancy, so a fair number, I think 5 or 6 of them, were sunk, and in many cases not in ding dong battle, like the Tecumseh, of course, but the Weehawk and just a wave, and there were a couple of other ships that sank for one. Thank you for your listening. I look forward to speaking with you again. Another episode of Stan the History Man. Thank you very much.